The morning of Ethan Caldwell's wedding began with a bright, golden sunrise that reflected off the tall glass windows of his mansion, filling the rooms with warmth and light. Inside, everything was moving like clockwork, as if the entire world had prepared itself for this single, perfect day. Staff hurried quietly through the grand hallways, carrying trays of delicate pastries, sparkling champagne flutes, and white roses that would decorate the cathedral. Every corner of the mansion smelled faintly of fresh flowers, vanilla, and expensive perfumes, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Ethan, the young tycoon, stood in front of a full-length mirror in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, adjusting his cuffs with careful precision. His reflection showed a man in control, confident, and handsome, yet behind his steady gaze, a faint tension lingered, almost invisible to anyone else. This day was supposed to be the peak of his life, a union of two powerful families, and a display of success that everyone would remember for years. Outside the mansion, luxury cars lined the long driveway, their polished surfaces reflecting the morning sun, while chauffeurs checked doors and windows for the slightest imperfection. Guests began to arrive, stepping out of sleek black limousines and shiny sports cars, dressed in designer gowns, sparkling jewelry, and tailored suits. Each person greeted the other with polite smiles, whispered compliments, and discreet glances, all carefully maintaining an image of sophistication and elegance. Photographers moved around quietly, adjusting their cameras and lighting to capture every perfect moment, every arranged smile, every pose that screamed wealth and status. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation, as if the very walls of the mansion and cathedral could sense the importance of the day. Inside the bridal suite, the bride's attendants fluttered around like bees, helping her into a gown that seemed made of flowing clouds, adorned with delicate lace and sparkling gems. Hairstylists and makeup artists added the final touches, brushing soft strands, smoothing the tiniest imperfections, and ensuring that every detail was flawless. Outside, the string quartet began to play a soft, gentle melody, its notes drifting through the morning air and giving the entire scene a dreamlike quality. Ethan took a deep breath, listening to the music, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine the perfect future, filled with love, admiration, and applause. Yet beneath the glittering surface of this perfect wedding day, there was a quiet tension, a small emptiness that Ethan could not ignore. No one could see it because everyone was too busy celebrating, too busy maintaining appearances, and too focused on the grandeur surrounding them. He thought about the years it took to reach this point, the endless meetings, sleepless nights, and sacrifices he made to build his empire. All the money, the fame, and the influence seemed meaningless when he realized that success had cost him pieces of himself that he might never get back. As he walked down the long, polished marble hallway toward the waiting cars, he saw the staff bow slightly in respect, the photographers adjusting for the perfect shot, and the guests turning to catch a glimpse of the young tycoon. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate, because in a world where every moment is captured and remembered, nothing could be left to chance. The streets outside were already crowded with onlookers, their curiosity drawn to the spectacle of wealth and power, eager to witness a wedding that would be talked about for years. Ethan's mind wandered briefly to his bride, who was waiting inside the cathedral, beautiful, poised, and smiling, unaware of the thoughts racing through his mind. The cathedral itself looked like a palace, with tall stained glass windows reflecting the sun's rays in rainbow colors across the stone floor. The doors were polished to a mirror shine, and the steps leading up to them were lined with white flowers, creating a perfect aisle for the bride to walk down. Every detail had been planned, rehearsed, and perfected, from the seating arrangements to the order of the music. Even the air seemed charged with anticipation, heavy with the expectation that this wedding would be flawless, unforgettable, and a testament to power and elegance. Ethan paused at the bottom of the steps, looking out at the assembled crowd, and for the first time, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. He wondered if anyone would notice the small unease he felt, the quiet whisper of doubt that he tried to ignore. He remembered the sacrifices he made along the way, the people he left behind, and the parts of himself he buried under ambition. Yet, the sunlight glinting off the chandeliers, the soft music floating in the air, and the smiles of the people around him reminded him why this day mattered, at least to everyone else. Taking a deep breath, he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his tie one last time, and prepared to step into a life that was carefully scripted, perfectly framed, and designed to impress. The world saw a young tycoon at the pinnacle of success, walking confidently toward the altar. But deep inside, a quiet question lingered, unspoken and unanswered. Could perfection really fill the spaces that wealth, power, and status could not reach? Just as Ethan Caldwell took his first step toward the cathedral, the world around him seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The soft melody of the string quartet, the murmur of excited guests, and the subtle click of photographers' cameras all faded into the background, replaced by a single, unexpected presence. A small black girl, no more than 8 years old, stood firmly in the center of the polished marble steps, her dark eyes wide and unflinching. She wore a simple dress that had obviously been chosen with care but lacked the sparkle and elegance of the wedding guest's attire. In her small hands, she clutched an envelope, worn at the edges, as if it had traveled through years of secrecy just to reach this moment. Ethan paused, startled by the sudden intrusion. His mind raced, expecting the usual, security rushing to remove her, whispers from the crowd, maybe even a minor disruption, but something about the girl's gaze made him hesitate. She did not flinch or step aside. Instead, she planted her feet firmly and looked up at him as though she had been waiting for this exact moment her entire life. The staff and photographers froze, unsure of how to react, and murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves over still water. People whispered about the audacity of a child daring to stop a billionaire on his wedding day, but no one dared move closer, sensing something unusual in the air. "Please," the girl said softly, yet her voice carried a strength far beyond her size, "I need to talk to you." The word "please" seemed simple, polite even, but the determination behind it struck Ethan like a sudden, cold wind. He could feel the tension in the crowd, the curiosity, the confusion, but more than that, he felt something he had not experienced in years, unease, a stirring in his chest that demanded attention. Without thinking, he raised his hand, signaling the security guards to stop, and bent slightly to meet her eyes at her level. For the first time that morning, the carefully controlled world he had built around him faltered, even if just for a moment. Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. The girl did not answer immediately, her fingers tightening around the envelope as if drawing courage from its weight. The crowd leaned in, cameras trained on the unexpected encounter, waiting for a reaction that might turn the day into chaos. But instead of fear or panic, the girl's expression was steady, almost solemn, as if she carried a truth too heavy for words. "My name is Ava," she said finally, holding the envelope out toward him. "My mom told me to give this to you if I ever saw you." Ethan's hand hovered in the air, unsure whether to take the envelope, unsure whether he wanted to know the secret it contained. Memories stirred in the corners of his mind, distant and faded, a woman he had loved years ago, a life he had walked away from, a choice that had seemed right then but left a lingering emptiness. He looked down at Ava and noticed the striking resemblance, the same dark, expressive eyes, the same determined stance, the same stubborn courage that he remembered in her mother. The crowd had grown silent, sensing that this was no ordinary interruption. Some whispered that it might be a prank, others thought it was some strange publicity stunt, but Ethan knew instinctively that it was something far more real, far more important. He reached out slowly and took the envelope, feeling the paper's soft texture, the slight wrinkles and creases that spoke of time and secrecy. As he unfolded the letter, he immediately recognized the handwriting, elegant and flowing, familiar and haunting. It was from Mariah, the woman he had loved and lost, the one he had left behind in pursuit of ambition. The words on the page hit him like a storm, each sentence revealing the hidden past he had never known. He had a daughter, a life he had never seen, a love he had never fulfilled. Ava stood quietly, watching him carefully, waiting for his reaction, understanding more than anyone that the truth in that envelope would change everything. Ethan felt a surge of emotion he could not name, shock, guilt, sorrow, and a strange, overwhelming sense of connection to the small girl in front of him. For the first time in his carefully planned life, he realized that some things could not be scheduled, polished, or controlled. The cathedral doors loomed behind him, the music swelling once again, but now it felt distant and hollow. The wedding, the ceremony, the grandeur of wealth, it all seemed insignificant in comparison to the child standing before him. Ethan knelt slightly to bring himself closer to Ava, not wanting to intimidate her, not wanting to miss a single detail of the moment that would redefine his life. And in her eyes, he saw the reflection of the woman he had loved, the consequences of his choices, and the heartache that had quietly followed him through the years. The unexpected interruption had stopped more than just his steps, it had stopped time itself, demanding attention, demanding truth, demanding that he face a past he had buried beneath ambition. And in that moment, Ethan knew that nothing about this day would ever be the same again. Ethan held the envelope in his hands, staring at it as if it had suddenly grown heavier than all the gold in the world. The small girl, Ava, stood quietly before him, her dark eyes wide but calm, watching him with a patience and courage that seemed far beyond her years. He felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity coursing through him, fear of what the letter might reveal, and curiosity about why destiny had chosen this exact moment to confront him. The crowd around them had gone silent, sensing the weight of the unfolding moment, whispers fading into the background as everyone held their breath, waiting to see the billionaire's next move. He slowly tore open the envelope, careful not to rip the fragile paper inside. The handwriting on the letter was unmistakable, delicate, flowing, and hauntingly familiar. It was Mariah's, the woman he had loved years ago, the one whose smile had once lit up his world, the one he had walked away from chasing ambition and empire. Ethan's heart thumped painfully as he began to read, each line pulling him deeper into a past he thought he had left behind. The letter revealed something he had never expected. Ava was his daughter, the child Mariah had kept hidden to protect him from guilt and responsibility. She had hoped he would live his life freely, unaware of the existence of a child he had unknowingly fathered. The words described quiet hospital rooms, late nights, and decisions Mariah had made alone, all while carrying the secret of his daughter silently in her heart. Each sentence carved a hollow ache into Ethan's chest, making him realize how much time he had lost, how many milestones he had missed, and how unprepared he was to face this truth. Ava shuffled her feet slightly, her small fingers twisting the edge of her dress, but she did not speak. She seemed to understand that this letter contained a bridge between their worlds, a key to a connection she had always longed for but could only hope existed. Ethan's eyes moved down the page again, tracing the words slowly, drinking in every sentence, every emotion, every carefully hidden sorrow. He read about Mariah's illness, about the quiet struggle of raising a child alone, and about the love that never faded even after all the years. When he finally looked up, Ava's gaze met his, steady and trusting, as if she were silently asking, "Are you ready to be a part of my life now?" Ethan's throat tightened, and for a moment he could not speak. The world around them, the cathedral, the crowd, the music, seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of revelation and raw emotion. He felt the weight of responsibility press down on him, heavier than any boardroom decision, heavier than any empire he had ever built. The letter ended with a line that made his hands tremble and his chest ache. "She deserves more than I could ever give her, but one day, she will know the father who loves her, even if he does not know it yet." Ethan's eyes met Ava's once again, and he saw the reflection of Mariah in the small curve of her smile, the stubborn determination in her posture, and the innocence tempered by the burden of waiting for him. He realized in that moment that all the wealth, power, and status he had acquired could not replace what he had lost, the chance to be a father from the beginning, the chance to share in every small, precious moment. Ava finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear, will you be my dad?" Ethan knelt slowly to meet her at eye level, taking her small hands gently in his, feeling the warmth and life of someone who was unmistakably his own. The tears he had held back for years threatened to spill, but he swallowed hard, knowing that this was only the beginning. Ava's small grip held him steady as though she were giving him the courage he needed to face the truth, the grief, and the hope all at once. In that brief, suspended moment, Ethan felt everything change. The wedding, the empire, the carefully constructed life of wealth and appearances, all of it felt distant and meaningless compared to the connection he now shared with Ava. He understood for the first time what Mariah had tried to protect, and he vowed silently that he would never let the years of absence define their relationship. He would become the father Ava deserved, no matter how late the introduction, no matter how shocking the revelation, no matter how complicated the path ahead. As he folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope, Ethan finally smiled at Ava, a smile filled with awe, humility, and promise. For the first time in a long time, he felt something real, something unshakable, something worth more than any empire. And in the background, the cathedral doors loomed, the music swelled, and the world continued moving forward, but for Ethan and Ava, time itself had stopped, allowing a new beginning to quietly, beautifully take root. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, the letter still clutched in his hand, and the reality of Ava's existence pressed down on him like a weight he had never felt before. He looked at her small, trusting face and felt a surge of emotions that had lain dormant for years: shock, guilt, sorrow, and a deep, aching longing. Memories began to surface, unbidden and relentless, like waves crashing over him, pulling him back into a past he had tried so hard to forget. He remembered Mariah's laughter, bright and warm, echoing in quiet hallways of their first apartment, the way she would tilt her head when she was thinking. He remembered the nights they stayed up talking about their dreams, their fears, and the future they imagined together, a future he had chosen to abandon in pursuit of ambition. The realization hit him like lightning: he had missed everything, every first word, every scraped knee, every bedtime story that had shaped Ava into the girl standing before him. He could see the traces of Mariah in Ava, the same eyes that had once looked at him with love and trust, the same stubborn determination, the same small gestures that carried the weight of unspoken truths. Ethan felt a hollow ache in his chest as he thought of the years lost, the birthdays, holidays, and quiet moments that he could never get back. All the power, wealth, and success he had amassed suddenly felt meaningless compared to the treasure he had ignored, the daughter he had never known existed. He recalled the day he had left Mariah, confident in his choices, believing that success required sacrifice, believing that love could wait. At the time, it had seemed like the right decision: the empire, the opportunities, the prestige, but now, looking at Ava, he understood the cost of that choice. The faces of all the people he had worked with, congratulated him, and admired him in business meetings blurred into insignificance. None of it mattered when weighed against the absence he had caused in the life of the child who was now holding his gaze, waiting for a father he had never been. Ethan's mind wandered further into memories he had buried, of Mariah's letters, half-hidden messages, and signs he had ignored, thinking he had no time for distractions. He remembered moments where he could have paused, could have asked questions, could have reached out, but ambition had been louder than love. Now, every "what if" echoed like a haunting refrain, a constant reminder of what he had lost, what he had abandoned, and what he had never been able to reclaim. He could feel the weight of regret pressing down, heavy and relentless, mixing with the newfound hope and responsibility that Ava's presence demanded. Ava shifted slightly, sensing the storm of emotion within him, but she remained steady, her small hand still resting in his, as if silently telling him that it was not too late to start again. Ethan swallowed hard, realizing that this child, this daughter, deserved more than a father who only knew her through letters and memories. He wanted to apologize for the years of absence, for the missed milestones, for the love he had failed to give, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, he knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to her eye level, hoping that his presence, his attention, and his promise could speak louder than any apology could. As he looked at Ava, he began to make silent vows in his mind, promises he would keep no matter how hard or complicated the road ahead became. He promised to be there for her first steps, first words, first days at school, and every small moment that had already passed him by. He promised to honor Mariah's love, even in her absence, and to give Ava the family, guidance, and protection she deserved. And, most importantly, he promised to never let ambition again outweigh the bond between a father and his child. The sounds of the wedding, soft music, murmuring guests, the rustle of gowns, faded into the background as Ethan felt a shift inside himself. For the first time, he truly understood that wealth and power could not fill the emptiness left by love neglected, and that every moment he had lost could never return. Yet, in the midst of all this regret, he also felt a flicker of hope, fragile but undeniable. Ava's presence had given him a chance at redemption, a chance to rewrite the story of his life, and to finally be the father he should have been all along. Ethan looked down at Ava, his heart heavy with regret but swelling with love and determination. "I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible but full of meaning, "for everything I missed, but I promise, I will never miss another moment with you." Ava's small hand tightened around his, her eyes reflecting trust and a quiet understanding. In that moment, the past, the pain, and the mistakes all converged, but so did a new beginning, a chance for a father and daughter to build a bond that neither time nor absence could ever break. Ethan took a shaky breath, still kneeling before Ava, and tried to process the full weight of what he had just learned. Her small hand in his felt warm, real, and grounding, yet the truth of her existence pressed down on him like a tidal wave, threatening to sweep away the carefully built life he had planned. For years, he had walked through a world of marble floors, chandeliers, and endless business deals, believing that success could replace the emptiness he sometimes felt inside. Now, that emptiness had a face, a voice, and a name, Ava, the daughter he never knew, the living reminder of a past he had abandoned. Ava looked up at him, her eyes calm and steady, but there was a question in them that pierced deeper than anything Ethan had ever faced. "Where is my mom?" He felt his chest tighten as he realized he would have to confront the one truth he had been dreading, the final, unchangeable fact of her absence. His voice caught, and for a moment, no words came, only the hum of the distant music from the cathedral and the quiet whispers of the curious crowd around them. Finally, he managed to speak, his voice low and heavy with emotion. She went to heaven last spring." Ava's small body shivered slightly at the words, and Ethan felt a pang of guilt that cut deeper than any business failure or public scandal ever could. He realized that not only had he missed the chance to be a father for years, but he had also never been there for the woman he loved, the mother of his child, in her final moments. All the wealth he had accumulated suddenly felt meaningless in the face of this loss. All the influence and power could not bring back the years, the hugs, or the whispered bedtime stories he had missed. Ethan's mind raced as he thought of Mariah's bravery, her strength, and the sacrifices she had made to protect both him and Ava, all without ever asking for anything in return. The letter in his hand, the envelope pressed tightly to his chest, became more than paper. It was a bridge between the past and the present, a connection to the family he never knew he had. Ethan looked at Ava again, seeing the traces of her mother in her small gestures, the tilt of her head, the determined way she held herself, the quiet courage that shone through her eyes. He realized that this child, though young, had already faced life's hardships with more resilience than he could ever have imagined, and now it was his turn to step up, to fill the role he had neglected. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but unlike before, it was not oppressive. It was a challenge he was willing to embrace, a purpose that finally gave meaning to his life beyond wealth and status. Ethan knelt fully before her, taking both of her small hands in his, and spoke with a quiet determination. "I don't know how to make up for all the time I've lost, Ava, but I promise I will be here from now on. I will never walk away again." Ava's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a brief moment, she seemed to measure the truth in his words, weighing them against the silence and absence she had known all her life. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded, her small hands tightening around his, and in that instant, Ethan felt a connection so deep, so real, that it erased years of regret in a single heartbeat. Around them, the world continued as if nothing had happened, the soft music, the excited whispers, the anticipation of the wedding, but for Ethan and Ava, everything had changed. The ceremony, the guests, the grandeur of the day, all of it faded into the background, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth of family, love, and loss. Ethan realized that he would have to make difficult choices, that his life of luxury and obligations might never be the same, but none of that mattered compared to this small, living reminder of love he had once let slip away. He understood that being a father was not about grand gestures or wealth, it was about presence, care, and a commitment that could never be broken. As the moment stretched on, Ethan gently lifted Ava into a comforting hug, feeling the fragile weight of her small body in his arms. He whispered promises into her hair, silent vows that he would never let her feel alone again, that he would make every effort to be the father she deserved. The world around them, photographers, guests, and distant music, mattered little compared to this one, transformative moment. And in that embrace, the heartbreaking truth of the past collided with the hopeful promise of the future, marking the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted, but one they would face together. Ethan finally pulled back slightly, holding her at arm's length to look into her eyes. "I cannot change the past," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "but I can be here now. I can be the dad you've always deserved." Ava's lips curved into a small, tentative smile, and Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, the kind of warmth that no business deal, no empire, and no fortune could ever buy. In that moment, the tycoon realized that some truths, no matter how heartbreaking, could lead to the most meaningful new beginnings of all. The cathedral doors loomed ahead, tall and imposing, gleaming under the afternoon sun, and inside, the music swelled, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Ethan felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a heavy cloak, suffocating yet impossible to ignore. He could see the bride waiting at the altar, poised, beautiful, and radiant, unaware of the emotional storm brewing just outside. Everything had been planned, years of anticipation, preparation, and expectation, but none of it mattered now, because in front of him stood Ava, his daughter, and the truth of his life had shifted irreversibly. He glanced at the luxury cars, the photographers adjusting their cameras, the guests leaning forward in curiosity, and suddenly the entire spectacle of wealth and status felt hollow. The smiles, the applause, the delicate arrangements, all of it seemed meaningless compared to the small, earnest eyes looking up at him, searching for a father she had never truly known. For the first time, Ethan realized that the life he had built for himself, filled with business empires and social prestige, could not fill the empty space left by absence. He understood that ambition, wealth, and appearances had blinded him to what mattered most, the chance to be present, to love, to guide, to protect. Ava tugged gently on his hand, pulling him out of his thoughts, and Ethan felt a wave of clarity crash over him. The choice was clear now, though it would not be easy: continue the path he had meticulously planned, walk down the aisle to a life of status and expectation. Or step away from the world he knew, leaving behind wealth, reputation, and society's applause, to embrace a life that would demand humility, patience, and love. A life that belonged to him and Ava, a life full of uncertainty, mistakes, and redemption. Ethan's mind raced through the possibilities, calculating the consequences, weighing the pros and cons as he had done countless times in boardrooms. But this was not a business decision, not one that could be solved with contracts, money, or influence. It was a choice of the heart, one that demanded honesty, courage, and an understanding of what truly mattered. He could see the tension in Ava's posture, her quiet hope and fragile trust, and he knew that his decision would shape her entire world. The bride, unaware of the turmoil outside, smiled at the approaching guests and adjusted her bouquet, confident that everything was unfolding perfectly. Ethan felt a pang of guilt and responsibility, knowing that stepping away from the wedding would shatter someone's carefully crafted expectations. Yet the idea of continuing with the ceremony, pretending that nothing had changed, pretending that he could live a life without his daughter, felt impossible. He realized that true courage was not about maintaining appearances, but about embracing the truth, no matter how painful or complicated it might be. Ethan took a deep breath and knelt down slightly in front of Ava, looking into her eyes with all the sincerity he could muster. "I have spent so many years chasing the wrong things," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I cannot live a life pretending that I do not belong with you. You are my daughter, and I will not walk away from you again." Ava's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her small hand gripping his tightly as if anchoring him to the reality they both now shared. For a fleeting moment, the grandeur of the wedding, the chandeliers, the crowd, and the music all seemed distant and insignificant. Nothing else mattered but the truth, the undeniable bond between a father and the child who had been waiting for him. He stood slowly, feeling a surge of resolve, and turned to his best man, who had been watching in stunned silence. "I cannot do this," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "Tell everyone, tell her. I cannot go through with this wedding." Gasps rippled through the crowd as whispers spread from guest to guest, cameras capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Ethan ignored it all, focusing only on Ava, on the tiny hand in his, on the life that needed him more than any empire or social expectation ever could. In that instant, the tycoon realized the truth he had long avoided: life was not about wealth, appearances, or approval. It was about love, presence, and choices that carried meaning beyond status and comfort. And as he took a final glance toward the cathedral doors, he knew that walking away was not abandoning responsibility, but embracing the most important responsibility of all: being a father, a protector, a guide. The choice was no longer between duty and desire, wealth and family, obligation and love. It was clear, simple, and undeniable. Ethan squeezed Ava's hand gently, smiling through the swirl of emotions, and felt the first real sense of peace he had known in years. The world outside continued its chatter and music, but for Ethan and Ava, time had slowed, offering them a chance at a life built on truth, courage, and love. This was the moment that would define both their lives, a choice between worlds that would lead them to something neither of them had ever expected, but both had secretly hoped for. And as they turned together, hand in hand, toward the uncertain path ahead, Ethan knew with certainty that this was the right choice, the only choice, the one that mattered most. Ethan took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the warmth of Ava's small hand in his, and turned his gaze away from the cathedral doors that had promised a life of wealth, status, and expectation. The crowd around them had grown restless, whispers spreading like wildfire as guests exchanged confused glances, photographers clicked furiously, and staff looked on with uncertainty. But Ethan did not see them. He did not see the luxury cars, the sparkling gowns, or the rows of eager onlookers. He saw only Ava, her small frame, her trusting eyes, and the undeniable truth that his life had changed in a single, irreversible moment. He straightened his shoulders and let out a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding, feeling the weight of his decision settle, heavy but right. This was not a retreat, he realized. It was an embrace of what truly mattered, the kind of choice no amount of money, power, or planning could dictate. Ethan glanced toward the cathedral one last time, seeing the bride waiting at the altar, her expression poised but uncertain. He felt a pang of guilt, not for the woman she was, but for the life he had agreed to step into blindly, a life built on appearances rather than heart. Turning back to Ava, he knelt slightly, bringing himself to her level, and whispered, "Are you ready?" Ava nodded, a mixture of nervousness and relief flickering across her face, her small hand gripping his tightly, as if pulling him into this new reality alongside her. Ethan smiled softly, a rare, unguarded expression, and gently draped his jacket over her shoulders, the fabric far too big but comforting all the same. The symbolism was not lost on him. This oversized jacket, a shield of warmth and protection, mirrored the role he would now carry in her life, a role he had ignored for far too long. He turned toward his best man, who had been frozen in place, watching the scene unfold like a spectator to history, and said with quiet certainty, "Tell them. I cannot go through with this wedding." The words hung in the air, simple yet monumental, carrying with them the weight of shattered expectations, unplanned consequences, and profound truth. Gasps echoed through the crowd, some hidden behind polite murmurs, some loud and involuntary, as the magnitude of his decision began to sink in. The bride's attendants whispered to one another in disbelief, some eyes widened with shock, while photographers struggled to capture the unexpected moment unfolding before them. Ethan ignored it all, focusing only on Ava, whose small hand in his anchored him in the reality that mattered. He lifted her slightly into his arms, holding her close, feeling the warmth and life of a daughter who had waited years for his presence. Her tiny arms curled instinctively around his neck, a gesture so pure and natural that it made all the riches, all the accolades, and all the empire building he had done seem utterly meaningless. In that embrace, Ethan understood fully what Mariah had known all along: the value of love, presence, and devotion could never be measured in money, power, or prestige. He stepped forward, walking slowly away from the cathedral steps, the crowd parting as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Some whispered, some gawked, some shook their heads, but none of it touched him. His life, his priorities, his heart had shifted irreversibly. With each step, the oppressive weight of expectation lifted slightly, replaced by a strange, liberating feeling, the freedom to choose love over status, family over society, truth over illusion. The music continued to play from the cathedral, but now it felt distant, hollow, a reminder of a life that had been carefully scripted but was no longer his. Ethan paused on the sidewalk, glancing down at Ava, who looked up at him with a mixture of trust and curiosity. He smiled again, more genuinely this time, and whispered, "We're starting something new, Ava. Something real." Her small smile blossomed into a shy but radiant grin, the kind of expression that lit up his world more than any chandelier or expensive gown ever could. He felt a surge of hope, fragile but undeniable, as he realized that this moment, this choice, was the true turning point of his life. Not the wedding, not the empire, not the applause, but the chance to be a father, to embrace love fully, and to start rebuilding a life that truly mattered. As they walked down the steps together, hand in hand, Ethan felt the weight of his old life slip away, replaced by responsibility, purpose, and a promise. The world watched, cameras clicked, and whispers continued, but he did not notice, for he was finally living for something beyond himself, something eternal and unshakable. And in the small, steady hand of his daughter, Ethan found a strength he had never known, a clarity he had never felt, and a love that would define the rest of his life. The city around them continued its hustle, unaware of the quiet revolution that had just taken place on the cathedral steps. Ethan held Ava's small hand in his, feeling the warmth, the life, and the hope she carried, and he knew with a certainty he had never felt before that nothing would ever be the same. The wedding, the guests, the grandeur, and the wealth, they were all part of a world he had outgrown in that single, life-changing moment. Now, the only thing that mattered was the tiny girl beside him, the daughter he had never known, and the future they would build together, step by step, day by day. As they walked away from the cathedral, Ava glanced up at him with curious eyes, full of questions and cautious hope. "I'm your dad," Ethan said softly, almost as if trying the words on for the first time, "and I promise, I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Ava's small fingers curled around his hand tighter, and she nodded slowly, a faint smile playing on her lips. It was a smile that carried relief, recognition, and a fragile trust, the kind of trust that only a child gives once she senses the truth of someone's heart. Ethan felt a surge of emotion he could hardly contain, a mixture of awe, sorrow, and determination. He thought of Mariah, her strength, her love, and her sacrifice, and he made a silent vow to honor her memory by being the father Ava deserved. The years of absence, the missed birthdays, the lost milestones, all of it weighed heavily on him, but he also realized that the past could not define the life he would create from this moment forward. Each step with Ava felt like a reclamation, a chance to rewrite the story that had been paused for so long, and a promise to himself that he would never let her feel alone again. They walked through quiet streets, the soft hum of city life surrounding them, and Ethan pointed out small things he had noticed, the park where she could play, the bakery with the best chocolate croissants, the bookstore with shelves full of adventures waiting to be discovered. Ava's eyes widened at the world she had only glimpsed in stories or imagined in her dreams, and she let out a small laugh, the first of many, Ethan hoped. Her laughter was like sunlight breaking through a storm, warming every corner of his heart, reminding him that joy could be found even after heartbreak and regret. In that moment, Ethan understood that the future would not be easy, that they would face challenges, questions, and the judgments of the world, but he also understood that love could guide them through anything. As evening approached, the sky turned a soft shade of gold, painting the city in warm hues. Ethan and Ava found a quiet bench in a small park, sitting side by side as the wind carried the scent of flowers and fresh grass. He looked down at her, studying the features that mirrored Mariah's, the curve of her smile, the depth of her eyes, the quiet courage she carried, and felt both awe and responsibility. "I promise you, Ava," he said, "I will never leave you again. I'll teach you, protect you, and be there for every moment, no matter what. Ava rested her head lightly against his shoulder, a gesture so simple yet profound that it melted the last traces of fear and uncertainty from Ethan's heart. For the first time, he felt complete, not because of wealth or power, but because of connection, trust, and the bond of family he had long denied himself. He realized that true success was not measured in buildings, cars, or contracts, but in love, presence, and the ability to be there when it mattered most. And as he sat there with his daughter, the noise of the city faded, leaving only the quiet hum of life, the warmth of the fading sun, and the promise of a future they would share together. Night fell, and the city lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth, illuminating the path before them. Ethan stood slowly, offering Ava his hand once again, and together they walked into the night, a father and daughter beginning a new chapter of life. The past was behind them, full of lessons, regrets, and memories, but the future stretched ahead, filled with hope, laughter, and the chance to create moments that mattered. Ethan smiled down at Ava, feeling the unspoken understanding between them, a bond that would guide every step of their lives from this day forward. In that quiet, golden night, the tycoon realized that he had discovered something far more valuable than wealth, power, or prestige. He had discovered the true meaning of family, love, and redemption. And as they walked together into the unknown, hand in hand, father and daughter, the world around them seemed smaller, softer, and filled with endless possibility. This was their new beginning, fragile yet strong, heartbreaking yet beautiful, and entirely theirs to live.